Good morning, Councillor Nun. We are here in your ward.
Yes, good morning.
Tell us a little bit about yourself, actually. When did you first become a councillor for Southampton City Council?
I first became a county councillor in 1981, and I actually, for this ward, Bargate ward, I actually served 8 years as a county councillor. In 1991, I was elected to the City Council for the Fremantle ward, which is a neighbouring ward to the city centre, just on the way up to Shirley, and I was a councillor there for 10 years. And then in 2001, I was elected to the City Council for Bargate ward, which I've served on and off since then. I had a 3-year gap in 2008 to 2011, and I came back in 2011, and I've represented Bargate ward ever since then.
How much time do you spend on council business every week?
30 hours, something like that, yeah. As an estimate, sometimes different, so.
You are saying you have a job?
I have a job, yes. So I have a job I work 4 days a week. I work with adults with learning difficulties. And I also do council work as well. So I don't have any family commitments. So I do all, so I can spend all my time doing, when I'm not working, doing council stuff.
What are most of the concerns that residents come to you for?
Increasingly now we're seeing complaints about antisocial behaviour, and we're seeing, and we have a big issue with drug taking as well in the city centre, which so those issues that, and I put them into as part of antisocial behaviour areas. The other area where I get lots of complaints in the city centre is people looking in inadequate housing. For one reason or another. You've got families, with insufficient bedrooms for the number of children they got, and because there isn't sufficient numbers of proper social housing in the city, people are having to wait longer on a waiting list to get better accommodation. So in that area, I get lots of complaints about private rented accommodation with poor poor maintenance, so that's an issue. Parking is another one. I think parking is a frustrating issue because people, there's more cars than spaces, so we've got to manage car parking, and people don't like to, people think they have a right to park outside the door, but if you've got 3 cars, you can't park outside your front door, can you?
The issue of building student housing has been highly controversial.
Yes.
Among local people.
Yes.
What is the feedback that you have had from people living in your ward about student housing built?
I think there's 2 aspects of that, and it is quite controversial with some people, and it's not solely student accommodation that's being built. We've got roundabout on Queensway, the fruit market, and we've got developments on the corner of Queensway and East Street, which is for rented accommodation. But the student I think there's 2 aspects of that. Is that we do need to have attractive accommodation for students, because students are an important part of the universities, and students are an important part of the economic future of the city. They bring in investment in the city, they provide jobs, and we want the students to stay. So those skills that they've learnt in Southampton, they use in Southampton. So we need to ensure that they've got decent accommodation. And the other aspect of that is, and I'll come back to your question in a second, but the other aspect is that we have lots of quite poor HMO property within the Polygon, parts of Fremantle and other parts of the city. For my ward, it's Polygon. The landlords on the whole don't necessarily always, they're not interested in keeping the properties up. It drags the area down because you get you lose the mix in an area, so you get dominated by HMOs and dominated by students. Families move away, and that area becomes, it's a less pleasant place to live. So by actually providing more purpose-built student accommodation, it will actually take people out of the HMOs, and maybe some of those could get back, could then be converted back to family accommodation. And I know, and I've actually spoken to landlords of HMOs who will tell you they find it much more difficult now to let, and so they've got vacancies all the time, because the students are choosing better accommodation. So it is important. I think that there's one aspect, because the city centre is quite noisy at times. Student accommodation is probably better in the city centre than than a noisy environment, because they'll probably be much more tolerant, to be honest, and than anyone else. So we need to that expect, but it is important that we also continue to build affordable rented accommodation in the city centre, and that is happening, where we can. So we're doing both. And I know people say we're only building students, but it's like not quite true.
My information and my observation is that whilst students might be moving out of HMSO,
Yes.
Houses in multiple occupation are being filled with immigrants who come to work here on low wages.
When we took control of the City Council in 2013, one of the first things we did, and I was actually quite involved in that work because I went up to Oxford to see what Oxford were doing, we actually set up an HMO registration scheme where all landlords of HMOs had to register with the council, had to pay a fee, and had to abide by certain standards. So the accommodation had to be fulfill all health and safety standards, and they had to keep the property up. They had to ensure that the outside the property looked neat and tidy, and rubbish was managed better than it was, and it's been reasonably successful. We've actually forced out some of the worst landlords, and we've improved the standard of properties for people using HMOs. HMOs are, part of the housing stock that cities need. Not only for students, it's same for particularly young single people. So, we need to have an element of HMO for those people, and for migrants coming to the city who are making a massive contribution to our economy, ought to be able to find somewhere that they can afford to live. So I have no problem, and but it is important, the council, we brought in the registration scheme, we've improved the standard of HMOs, and we must continue to do that, because I think it is a legitimate part of the accommodations. Actually, because we've actually seen massive cuts in funding in local government, and one of the areas where some of those cuts were environmental health inspectors was cut to a very low number. But now, because we've got the resources from the registration scheme, we're able to employ officers to go and look at properties to make sure that those properties were providing the standard accommodation that we would expect anyone to live in. Yeah. So we set the scheme up 2014, I think it was, and as soon as we we employed the officers. So we've had additional officers for the last 4 years because of the HMO, because of the fees from the registration scheme. So we've had them for 4 years now. So we've had them, and they've been able to go around inspect the property. So it's not new. They're there already.
Fantastic.
Yes.
Thank you very much for clarification, because for our viewers, this is important for them to know that if they got a problem with HMO landlords, they could contact.
Or they did very rightly contact an environmental officer. If they feel their property is a substandard, please contact the environmental officer immediately, or contact someone from the council immediately, and it will be looked into.
A lot of people I speak to have problems getting through to the council.
Yeah, I think that is an issue we're looking at, and I think we do accept that it is difficult for some people to contact the council, and we are improving that. We're one of the things we've done recently is that we're renegotiating our contract with Capita, who are the people, because we are who provide that service for us. We want to take that service away from them, and for us to actually provide, because we think we can do it better than Capita.
Recently on national news, there was an investigation into the fact that landlords would evict people who complained to the council about their accommodation because it was easier and cheaper than to put things right. So have we had any situations in your ward? Revenge evictions?
I've not heard of, I've personally not come across any. I'm sure there have been, but I'm not personally aware, and I can check to see if there have been any, but it's not been something that's been brought to my attention.